Criminal justice reform has been a major issue for Black Lives Matter movement for a number of people for a number of years. One of the first bills President Barack Obama signed into law was lowering the disparity between crack cocaine and powder cocaine from 101 to 18-1, but it's still a problem when it's 18-1. So yesterday, a bipartisan effort was announced to actually deal with the issue of mandatory minimums and also a variety of other issues. Is this a good bill? Is it a good law? Let's break it down with our panel right here. First of all, Lauren Victoria Burke, I want to go to you. Exactly what is in this bill? Well,
what's in it is a step back from mandatory minimums that I think is noteworthy, given the fact that usually punitive is the direction we've been going in for the last 24 years.
And we've had federal judges, we had prosecutors, right. We've had Attorney General Eric Holder and others, the president, numerous folks saying, look, throwing folks in jail with mandatory minimums was stupid, was asinine, and made no sense.
Exactly. It ekes out basically a way for people to escape the mandatory minimum, but it's not as good as the House bill, quite frankly, the Safe Justice Act, which is a lot more direct on that note, because in fact this Senate bill does add 2 new mandatory minimums to the law for domestic violence and terrorism, which really is sort of redundant and unnecessary because there's not too many judges that are going to give a light sentence for that. It also has an expungement provision. I mean, you have to understand that expungement is better done on the state level than the federal level, but it was good that Cory Booker got that in there, quite frankly, because it's not something that you would look up and see in a Republican bill in a Republican Congress, so it is good that he got that in, but it doesn't affect too many people.
Speaking of that, Senator Cory Booker was one of the folks yesterday who talked about this bipartisan Sentencing Reform and Corrections Act.
This legislation represents a real step forward. It deals with a comprehensive level of reforms, from looking at sentencing, to thanks again to Cornyn and White House, dealing with important things happening when people are in prison, preparing people for them coming out of prison. It focuses in on our children who are too often forgotten in this discussions of criminal justice reform. It truly does bring to our American legal system justice, and it's making it more like an American justice system.
We preserve main mandatory minimums, but we lower some and expand some of the enhanced minimums to make sure that violent and repeat drug offenders stay in prison and out of our communities. But for the first time, we're cutting back many of the most severe mandatory minimums so that they apply more fairly. We're also expanding the current safety valve and even creating a second safety valve so that offenders who have minor criminal histories and play minor roles in drug organizations are not swept up.
We believe that there are people who are incarcerated today for lengthy sentences at great expense who frankly should not be in those prisons. We think resources spent on those incarcerations are better spent in good law enforcement in our communities, in good work by prosecutors, and good work in our criminal justice system to avoid the incidents of crime. That's what this is all about.
It's taken a while for us to get here, and let's just be, I mean, it's been back and forth.
Yeah.
You have folks like the Koch brothers aligning with the likes of liberals and progressives
right.
On the left, but also, and again, they're not going to get the credit for it, but the reality is that there's no doubt in my mind, there's no way in the world we are at this point if you did not have massive protests in this country, in major cities, putting the pressure on members of Congress to say, do something now.
We have had more conversation over the last year after Mike Brown about the criminal justice system.
Mike Brown, Eric Garner, John Crawford.
The whole series. Exactly. We have had more conversations analyzing our criminal justice system and its fairness to people who are brown than we've had over the past year, than we've had over the past decade.
Black Lives Matter.
And that was Black Lives Matter. And that was an ability to get in the street and non-violently bring this to the public's attention.
And also I want to add, you know, and this can of course go further, as we talked about. There's a House bill, there's a system version. I was reading an essay actually by Ted Cruz. You have far-right Republicans now who are arguing not only should we get rid of these sort of minimum sentences, we would also look at overlap. We should also be looking at prosecutorial power on the federal level. We should look at sort of increasing jury trials so we don't have as many plea bargains that end up with people with long sentences. So I think this is sort of a top-to-down change. It is impressive. It's impressive. And if we can see this happening on the state level as well, that's where it's going to have an even bigger impact on the day-to-day lives.
Scott, look, we heard from prosecutors who said, look, they can look at a case and say, first of all, you're forcing me to go for the maximum to get a promotion. Attorney General Eric Holder said, look, let's get rid of that.
Right.
But the other issue is that you have prosecutors and judges who were saying, there's no reason for this person being in jail for 20
Exactly.
years.
Right.
But
Right.
their hands were tied.
Right,
Because
exactly.
of the federal sentencing guidelines. I like this bill a lot because it brings common sense to the forefront as opposed to partisanship on these elected officials. I think on the other issue that I think is hugely important is it eliminates juveniles from being put into cells by themselves, for one thing.
It rolls it back.
It rolls it back, yeah.
It puts some limits on.
But I think the bipartisanship on this bill is important, and it's there because it talks about reforming and reducing recidivism. Black folks, white folks, conservatives, liberals, these crimes and recidivism is affecting all of our
But let's do
communities.
real
And they
quick.
finally
And
come around on that.
also financially.
If we do a federal bill, we're talking about 200,000 people. We have over 2 million people behind bars and 9 million people in the correctional system with regard to parole and everything else.
Yep.
So this bill, I understand when federal legislation, is worked on, it trickles down. Usually people Xerox copy it in the states and it trickles down. But some of the people standing on that stage, namely Chuck Schumer, who was an author of the Clinton crime bill, he is the reason we have to sit here and roll this stuff back. So even though this is a great start, there needs to be a more dramatic move because there was a dramatic move that made us #1 in incarceration in the
Yeah, but
in the
also
world.
so the other thing this bill does is it reverts back. It's going to affect people, those $200,000 retroactive.
Right,
it reverts
and
back.
we're going to have to start looking at the impact this has had economically on black families and Latino families over the last 25 years.
In every single state, look, and you said you're right. The states are going to Xerox this because it's getting too expensive. I mean, that's as sick as this is. Black Lives Matter, whether you're right or left, people are realizing we cannot afford to incarcerate this many people on a regular basis.
Right.
So you're going to start seeing this happen in Georgia, and eventually it's going to get to those places like Texas and Mississippi because they're recognizing that we cannot afford this. We cannot afford to put people in jail for 20, 30, 50 years who are perfully healthy, who did not commit a violent crime.
Lauren, real quick, you also have conservatives who are blasting Republicans, especially in the House Judiciary Committee chair, for frankly not doing enough.
Well, yeah. Bob Goodlatte is a major problem.
From Virginia.
From Virginia. He's the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. He's a major obstructionist when it comes to... He apparently is going to do something next week on a few limited topics. We'll see what he does. But he should have had a bill already. See, what happens when these bills come out, people get jealous on the other side of the building, and they say they got to rush a bill out. But there's two bills, Safe Justice Act, and now this bill, and they're good. They're heading in the right direction.
All right, folks,
on this.
hold tight 1 second. We come back. Yeah, but the bill was introduced. Now the question is, will it get passed?
Yes.
Right, that was-
So now there's work to do.
How long will it take?
All right,
Competing bills,
yeah,
too.
absolutely. Now we come back. The New York Police Department, they now are demanding every time a force is used, the officer has to actually record it. Can this actually be a change for the good in New York? We'll talk with Tamika Mallow of the New York Justice League. Also, they play Pam and Cole on the hit sitcom Martin. They also were involved in the Triumph Awards. We'll show you them from the red carpet. Plus, Earthquake is in the house. And do you actually think this boy tried to challenge me to dance? Y'all know he has no rhythm whatsoever. Plus, Wesley Snipes has a new show on NBC called The Player. Player, Scott Bolden be back on News 1 Now on TV1.